The first thing you are aware of is not a gentle hand on your shoulder or the soft voice of your mother. The first thing you are aware of is a sound. It's a sharp, insistent, metallic jangling that cuts through the deep silence of the morning. It's the sound of the servant's bell from downstairs, a summons that travels up through the walls of the great, quiet house and into your nursery. It is the sound of the day officially beginning. You open your eyes. The room is cold. A faint, gray light struggles to get past the heavy velvet curtains drawn tightly across the tall window. You can see your breath, a small, pale cloud in the air. You are tucked tightly into a large bed with a high headboard. The linen sheets starched and cool against your skin. The air smells of beeswax, old wood, and the faint, sooty memory of yesterday's coal fire. There is no parent here. In fact, you haven't seen your mother or father since a brief, formal goodnight in the drawing room yesterday evening. The nursery is your world, a self-contained kingdom on the top floor of the house, connected to the adult world below by a steep flight of stairs and the pull of a bell rope. This physical separation is the first and most important rule of your existence. You live in a different country from your parents, a country with its own ruler, its own laws, and its own customs. The door to your room creaks open, and a young woman in a plain gray dress and a white apron bustles in. She is not your mother. She is not even Nanny, the undisputed queen of this domain. She is the under-nursemaid, a girl not much older than you, whose job it is to do the heavy lifting of the nursery. She curtsies, a quick bob of her head, not to you, but to the room itself, to the general idea of her duties, and moves silently to the fireplace. You watch as she clears out the old ashes and skillfully lays new kindling on coal. Her movements practiced and efficient. Her hands are red and chapped from work. She is the engine of your comfort, a person you see every day but barely speak to. This is the central pillar of your upbringing. Your daily life is managed not by family, but by a team of paid employees. Your parents have outsourced your entire childhood. They are the distant, benevolent monarchs of the household, but your nanny is the prime minister, the one who wields the real power over your day-to-day life. Historians and sociologists still debate the emotional reality of this arrangement. Was this distance a sign of genuine coldness, a reflection of an era where showing too much affection or being too familiar with one's children was seen as a failure to build a strong, moral character? Or was it a practical response to the demands of the time? Families were large. Households were complex businesses to manage, and infant mortality was tragically high. Some scholars argue that keeping a slight emotional distance was a psychological defense mechanism, a way for parents to protect their hearts from the constant threat of loss. Others see it as a different, and now it expression of love. In this view, providing a child with a safe home, a good education, and a respected place in society was the ultimate act of parental devotion. Far more important than cuddles or bedtime stories. The truth, as always, is probably a complex mixture of all these things. You don't think about it in these terms. Of course, this is simply the way the world is. The idea of waking up to a hug from your father or a kiss from your mother is as foreign as the idea of flying to the moon. Their world is downstairs, a world of mysterious adult concerns, of hushed conversations and the rustle of newspapers. Your world is up here, in the cold, quiet nursery. The under-nursemaid has succeeded in lighting the fire. A small, cheerful crackle begins to push back against the room's oppressive chill. Her first task is complete. She straightens up, wipes her hands on her apron, and turns to the large ceramic washed sand in the corner of the room. On it sits a heavy pitcher and a wide, shallow basin. Her next job is to pour the water for your morning wash, a morning ritual that is its own special kind of ordeal. The sound of the water splashing into the basin is a heavy, flat sound. There is no steam, no hint of warmth. It is the sound of cold water meeting cold ceramic, a dull thud that serves as your final summons. You push back the starched sheets and swing your legs over the side of the bed. The floorboards are icy beneath your bare feet, and you hesitate for a moment, shivering in your thin nightshirt, dreading what comes next. The under-nursemaid doesn't hurry you, but her silent, waiting presence is its own form of pressure. This is not optional. You trudge over to the washed sand. The water in the basin is shockingly clear and still. This is your morning ordeal, a ritual designed, you have been told, for your own good. It is meant to be character building. A daily plunge into cold water was believed to strengthen the constitution, ward off illness, and, most importantly, combat any signs of weakness or moral softness. It was a physical manifestation of the Victorian obsession with fortitude and self-denial. A warm wash was seen as an indulgence, a luxury that could lead a child down the path to laziness and effeminacy. You cup your hands, dip them into the basin, and brace yourself. The water is so cold it feels like a physical blow, 1,000 tiny needles pricking your skin. You gasp, your breath catching in your throat, as you splash it onto your face. It's a violent awakening, an assault on the senses that leaves your skin tingling and your mind reeling. You do this again and again, washing your face, neck, and arms, your movements quick and desperate, driven by the simple desire to get it over with. Next comes the soap. It's not the fragrant, gentle soap you might imagine. It is a formidable, brownish-red bar of carbolic soap. It has a sharp, medicinal smell, a smell that clings to your skin for hours. This is a scent of modern science, a smell of progress. Carbolic acid was popularized by Joseph Lister as a powerful antiseptic, a weapon in the new war against invisible germs. To your parents and their generation, this harsh, chemical smell was the smell of safety, of cleanliness, of protecting their children from the myriad diseases that haunted their world. It was a scientific marvel. To you, it's a harsh, unpleasant soap that dries out your skin and makes your eyes water if you're not careful. The under-nursemaid scrubs your back with a rough flannel cloth, her movements efficient and impersonal. There is no gentleness here. This is a task to be completed. Finally, you are done, and she hands you a towel. It is not a soft, fluffy towel. It is made of coarse, heavy linen, designed more for abrasion than absorption. It scrapes against your skin, leaving it red and raw but undeniably dry. You stand there, shivering, your skin buzzing with the after effects of the cold. But you are clean. You are braced for the day ahead. This daily ritual is a perfect example of a subject historians of childhood are still untangling. Was this practice, which seemed so harsh to us, rooted in genuine, if misguided, medical belief? Or was it more about discipline? The line between health and morality was incredibly blurry in the Victorian era. Cleanliness was next to guidelines. Literally, a clean body was thought to reflect a pure soul. Therefore, forcing a child to endure the discomfort of a cold wash was also a moral lesson. It taught you to master your body, to suppress your complaints, and to submit to a sensible, if unpleasant, routine. Some historians argue that we should view this through the lens of their time. Parents and nannies were following the best advice of contemporary doctors and child-rearing manuals. They genuinely believed they were giving their children a physical and moral advantage in a dangerous world. They were acting out of a sense of duty and a different form of love. Other historians, however, contend that these practices were, consciously or not, tools of control. They were about breaking a child's will, about instilling obedience from the moment they woke up. It was a way to produce quiet, compliant, and manageable children who would not disrupt the rigid order of the household. The debate is about intent, a thing history can rarely capture with certainty. You know nothing of these debates. You only know that you have survived the first trial of the day. Your body is cold. Your skin is tingling, but you are awake. Fully, uncomfortably awake. The fire in the hearth is beginning to throw off a weak but welcome warmth. The under-nursemaid now turns her attention to the wardrobe, from which she will select your clothes for the day. And you know, with a sinking heart, that the ordeal of getting clean is about to be replaced by the ordeal of getting dressed. The under-nursemaid opens the tall, dark wardrobe, its doors swinging open with a low groan. Inside hangs your attire for the day. a collection of garments that look less like children's clothes and more like miniature torture devices. Getting dressed is not a simple matter of pulling on a shirt and trousers. It is a complex, multi-layered process of construction. And you are the mannequin. First comes the undergarments. A long-sleeved, high-neck chemise made of fine but unforgiving lice-stiff linen. Then, a pair of drawers, equally starchy, that reach down to your knees. These are your base layers, designed for modesty and to protect the outer clothes from the oils of your skin. Over this, if you are a boy of a certain age, you might wear a skeleton suit, a peculiar outfit where the high-waisted trousers button directly onto a short jacket, creating a single, restrictive garment. But if you are a younger boy, or a girl of any age up to your teens, you will be put into a dress. The Victorian notion that breeching, the moment a boy first wears trousers, was a major milestone meant that little boys often spent their first 5 to 7 years in clothes that were, to our eyes, indistinguishable from their sisters. You are being dressed in a sailor-style frock with a wide, starched collar and voluminous sleeves. The layers are what truly imprison you. Over the frock goes a pinafore, a crisp, white, all-encompassing apron designed to keep the dress beneath it pristine. The ultimate sin for a Victorian child was to be dirty or disheveled. The pinafore is your first line of defense against the constant threat of a smudge or a spill. Next come the stockings. Long, thick, woolen stockings, usually black or gray, that are held up by garters. They are itchy and perpetually seem to be wrinkling around your ankles. Finally, the shoes. Not soft, flexible sneakers, but hard, unforgiving leather boots that have to be fastened with a long, tedious row of buttons. You need a special tool, a button hook, to pull the tiny buttons through their stiff leather holes. You cannot possibly do this yourself. You are entirely dependent on the nursemaid to lace you in. And through it all, you must stand perfectly still. Wiggling is a sign of a poor character. Complaining is unthinkable. Your body is being molded and constrained, by piece, into the ideal image of a well-behaved, respectable child. There is no room for rough and tumble play in these clothes. They are designed for stillness, for presentation. You are an object to be looked at, the walking, talking display of your family's social standing, the quality of your lace collar, the crispness of your pinafore, the shine on your boots. All of it reflects back on your parents. One of the most curious and uncomfortable garments of this era was the corset, and not just for women. Children, both boys and girls, were often put into stays or soft corsets. These were not the extreme, waist-cinching devices worn by their mothers, but they were designed to serve a similar purpose, to train the body into the correct posture. They were meant to support the back and encourage a straight, upright spine. In reality, they were restrictive, uncomfortable, and likely did more harm than good by weakening the very muscles they were supposed to support. It was another case of an adult ideal being forced upon a child's body, a physical manifestation of the constant pressure to be upright in both posture and morals. Historians who study fashion and material culture are fascinated by Victorian children's clothing. Was this elaborate and restrictive way of dressing a form of loving care, an attempt to make children look beautiful and angelic, reflecting a romanticized ideal of childhood innocence? Or was it a to-love social control? The clothing made it physically difficult for a child to be boisterous or unruly. You can't climb a tree in a starched frock and button boots. You can't run freely when you're encased in layers of linen and wool. The clothes did the work of discipline for the adults. There is also a debate about class. The children of the poor, of course, did not dress this way. They wore patched-up hand-me-downs, often single-layer garments that allowed for far more freedom of movement out of sheer necessity. The elaborate, multi-layered, and perpetually clean outfit of an upper-class child was a status symbol. It announced to the world that your family was wealthy enough to afford not just the clothes themselves, but also the army of laundresses and nurse-maids required to maintain them. Your very appearance was a testament to your father's success. The final button is hooked. The final ribbon is tied. You are now fully assembled. You move stiffly, a slight rustling sound accompanying your every step. You feel trapped, encased in a shell of social expectation. You catch a glimpse of yourself in the long mirror on the wardrobe door. A small, formal-looking stranger stares back at you. Their expression is starched and impassive as their collar. The transformation is complete. You are now a presentable child, ready to be seen, but not, of course, heard. Now, you are ready for breakfast. Now that you are clean and properly encased in your daily uniform, you are ready for the first meal of the day. But you don't go downstairs to a sunny kitchen or family dining room. Instead, you proceed to another room within the nursery suite itself. This is the day nursery, a room distinct from the night nursery where you sleep. It is here that you will take most of your meals, under the strict and ever-present supervision of your nanny. The room is dominated by a large, heavy table, its dark wood polished to a high sheen. You take your seat on a straight-backed chair, your feet dangling far above the floor. The table is set with a white linen cloth, heavy silver cutlery, and porcelain dishes. Even up here, in the children's realm, the rituals of the dining room are observed. Your breakfast is not a bowl of sugary cereal or a stack of pancakes. It is a formidable, beige-colored affair. Before you is a bowl of porridge, not the creamy, sweet oatmeal you might imagine, but a thick, lumpy gruel made from coarse ground oats boiled with water and, if you are lucky, a splash of milk. There is no sugar, no honey, no fruit. Sweetness is considered an indulgence, something that could excite the passions and lead to a restless, unruly temperament. This porridge is bland, substantial, and, like the cold wash, believed to be character-building. Alongside the porridge is a thick slice of bread and butter, and a mug of milk, often diluted with water. This is the standard, unvarying breakfast of the well-to-do Victorian child. It is designed to be nutritious, filling, and, above all, plain. The silence in the room is thick and heavy, broken only by the scrape of your spoon against the bottom of the bowl and the ticking of a large clock on the mantelpiece. Nanny sits at the head of the table, not eating, but observing. Her presence is an invisible force field, enforcing the unspoken rules. You do not speak unless spoken to. You do not fidget. You do not put your elbows on the table. You must hold your spoon in the proper way. And you must, under no circumstances, make any sound while you are eating. Slipping is a crime of the highest order. You must finish everything in your bowl. Waste is a moral failing, a sign of ingratitude for the blessings you have been given. It does not matter if you are not hungry or if you find the lumpy texture of the porridge unpleasant. You will sit there until the bowl is clean. Nanny has an almost infinite capacity for patience in this regard. She can, and will, outwait any childish rebellion. Many a Victorian child has spent a miserable morning staring at a bowl of cold, congealed porridge, a silent battle of wills they are destined to lose. This strict approach to food in mealtimes is a subject of great interest to food historians and sociologists. They argue about its origins. Was it rooted in a genuine belief that's simple? Plain food was healthier for a child's delicate digestion. This was a common medical opinion at the time. Doctors warned that rich, spicy, or overly sweet foods could overstimulate a child's system, leading to both physical and moral corruption. Or was it, like so much else in your life, about discipline? By controlling what and how a child ate, you controlled the child. Mealtimes became a training ground for self-control, patience, and obedience. A curious and slightly sad food-related tidbit from this era is the concept of nursery food versus dining room food. The food you eat, the porridge, the boiled mutton, the steamed puddings, is deliberately different from the elaborate, multi-course meals being served to your parents downstairs. This created a culinary separation. The world of adult flavors, of spices, sauces, and culinary artistry was something you were not yet worthy of. You had to earn your way to a more sophisticated palate. This meant that for many children, the first time they tasted a complex sauce or a dish flavored with garlic was a strange and sometimes overwhelming experience. happening much later in their childhood than we would expect today. The great "what were they thinking?" debate among historians often centers on the nutritional science of the time. While the Victorian diet for children was high in calories and protein, it was often severely lacking in essential vitamins. Fresh fruit and vegetables were often viewed with suspicion, believed to cause digestive ailments. They were frequently boiled for so long that any nutritional value was destroyed. This lack of vitamin C, in particular, could lead to mild forms of scurvy, resulting in gum problems and a general failure to thrive. Parents and nannies, following the best medical advice they had, were inadvertently malnourishing their children in specific ways, all while believing they were providing the healthiest diet possible. You finish the last gelatinous spoonful of your porridge. You place your spoon neatly on the plate, wipe your mouth with your linen napkin, and place it back on the table. You have successfully navigated the first meal of the day without committing any major infractions. Nanny gives a small, almost imperceptible nod of approval. Breakfast is over. You may be excused from the table. You slide off your chair, your starched dress rustling. The bland, heavy food sits like a stone in your stomach, fuel for a day that will be long, quiet, and governed by 1,000 more invisible rules. With breakfast concluded, the true business of the day begins, and all of it revolves around one central, immutable figure. Nanny. She is not a warm, cuddly grandmother figure. She is the absolute monarch of the nursery, and her word is law. She is judge, jury, and executioner in your small world, and your own parents would no more interfere with her rulings than they would question the judgment of the Prime Minister. Your nanny is likely a middle-aged woman from a respectable, but not wealthy, background. She might be a clergyman's daughter or have come from a family that has seen better days. She speaks with a crisp, proper accent, and her movements are deliberate and efficient. She wears a sober, dark dress, a starched white apron, and a formidable cap. Her hands are rarely idle. They are always mending a torn garment, stirring a medicinal potion, or dispensing a sharp rap on the knuckles for a minor infraction. Her power over you is total. She dictates what you eat, what you wear, when you sleep, and how you play. She is the one who toilet trains you, teaches you your first prayers, and administers discipline. Your mother might give birth to you, but it is Nanny who raises you. The bond you have with her is the most significant emotional attachment of your young life, a complex mixture of fear, respect, and a deep, dependent form of love. This delegation of childcare was a hallmark of the upper and middle classes. A mother's role was to be the angel in the house, the manager of the household staff, the hostess of her husband's dinner parties, and the embodiment of feminine grace and piety. The physical, messy, and demanding work of raising children was seen as beneath her station. It was a job for a professional, and nannies were seen as professionals. A family would go to great lengths to hire a nanny with a good reputation and impeccable references. She was a high-status servant, often earning more than the cook or the butler, and she commanded her own territory, the nursery, with fierce autonomy. The relationship between Nanny and your mother is a subtle and often tense one. Your mother is her employer, but Nanny is the expert. She may have raised half a dozen other children from wealthy families before you. She has her own tried and true methods, her own beliefs about everything from diet to discipline. A wise mother knows not to meddle in Nanny's domain. This can create a strange dynamic where you, the child, become a pawn in a quiet power struggle between the two most important women in your life. A fascinating and little-known aspect of the nanny-minus-child relationship is the use of nursery language. Nannies often had their own special vocabulary, a collection of pet names, nonsense words, and unique terms for everyday objects and bodily functions. This created a secret, private language that only the children and their nanny understood. It was a way of building a unique, intimate world within the nursery, separate from the formal language of the adult world downstairs. This nursery slang, however, was also something a child had to learn as they grew older, shedding the language of their infancy as they prepared to enter polite society. The great academic debate surrounding the nanny phenomenon is about its psychological impact. What was the long-term effect of being raised by a paid caregiver, with your own parents relegated to the role of distant, formal visitors? Some historians, influenced by modern attachment theory, argue that this system was emotionally damaging. They suggest it created a generation of adults who found it difficult to form close, intimate bonds, having learned it from a young age that their primary attachment figure was, ultimately, someone who could be dismissed and sent away. They point to the memoirs of many famous Victorians, like Winston Churchill, who wrote with far more affection about their old nannies than their own mothers. Other scholars argue that this is a present ISD view, imposing our own cultural values onto the past. They contend that the nanny-child bond could be incredibly strong, loving, and that the system worked well within the context of its time. They argue that a good nanny provided a child with consistent, stable care and affection, sometimes more than a busy, socially overburdened mother could offer. In this view, the system was not about a lack of love, but a different distribution of it. It was a world where a child might have multiple mothers, the biological mother who was the source of status and legitimacy, and the nanny who was the source of daily comfort and care. You don't analyze your relationship with nanny. You simply live it. You know that a quick, approving nod from her can make your heart soar, and a single, disappointed minister can make you feel like the worst child in the world. She is the sun around which your small planet orbits. She is now instructing the governess, who has just arrived to begin your daily lessons. Nanny oversees even this, ensuring the curriculum meets her standards of moral and intellectual rigor. Her authority is absolute. Your parents may own the house, but Nanny owns you. Now that the domestic rituals of the morning are complete, your formal education begins. A new figure enters the nursery, a woman dressed in a modest but respectable dress, her hair pulled back neatly. She is not a servant, but she is not quite family either. She exists in the awkward social space between upstairs and downstairs. This is your governess, while Nanny is responsible for your body and your soul, your health, your manners, your morals. The governess is responsible for your mind. She has been hired to provide you with the rudiments of a gentle education, the kind of knowledge appropriate for a child of your station. You sit at the nursery table, which has now been cleared of breakfast dishes and transformed into a school desk. The atmosphere becomes formal, serious. The governess does not smile much. Her job is not to entertain you or to make learning fun. Her job is to instill information and discipline. Your lessons are a predictable and repetitive cycle. First comes reading. You read aloud from a book of moral tales, stories about virtuous children who are rewarded for their obedience and wicked children who come to a suitably grim end. The focus is less on reading comprehension and more on elocution. You must pronounce each word perfectly, with the correct, upper-class accent. Stumbling over a word or, heaven forbid, reading with a regional or common accent is a serious offense that will be corrected immediately. Next is penmanship. You are given a slate or a copybook and a pen with a sharp, scratchy note. You will spend an hour practicing your letters, copying out edifying proverbs like the idle mind is the devil's workshop or waste not, want not. The goal is to develop a perfect, elegant copper-peeled handwriting. Your own creativity or personal style is not encouraged. The aim is uniformity and precision. A messy, illegible hand is seen as a sign of a messy and disciplined mind. Then comes arithmetic. You do not learn concepts or theories. You learn by rote memorization. You recite multiplication tables until they are burned into your memory. You work through long, tedious addition and subtraction problems. The sums often involve practical matters of household management, like calculating the cost of groceries or the amount of fabric needed for a new set of curtains. Your education is, in many ways, preparing you for your future role as the master or mistress of a large home. If you are a girl, your education will also include the accomplishments. These are the skills designed to make you an attractive marriage prospect. You will have lessons in drawing, where you will learn to copy images of flowers and pleasant landscapes. You will learn to play the pianoforte, practicing scales and simple tunes for hours on end, and you will learn French, the language of high culture and diplomacy. You learn these things not for your own intellectual fulfillment, but to be able to perform them for guests, to be a credit to your family. A boy's education might include Latin and Greek, subjects considered too rigorous for the female mind, which would prepare him for entry into a prestigious public school like Eton or Harrow. A curious and slightly grim detail of the governess's life was her own precarious social position. She was a lady, but she was a poor one, forced to work for a living, a deeply uncomfortable status in Victorian society. She lived with the family, but she was not part of it. She ate her meals alone, after the children but before the servants. She was often lonely and isolated, trapped in a social no-man's-land. The figure of the lonely, tragic governess became a stock character in Victorian literature, most famously in novels like Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. The great historical debate about this form of education is whether it was truly education at all. Was it designed to foster intellectual curiosity and critical thinking? Or was it a form of social conditioning, designed to produce compliant, obedient individuals who knew their place in the world and would not challenge the existing social order? Many modern educators would argue the latter. The emphasis on rote memorization over understanding, on conformity over creativity, and on moral instruction over intellectual exploration, all point to a system designed to reinforce the status quo. It taught you what to think, not how to think. Other historians argue that we must judge it by the standards of its time. In an era before universal public education, a private education from a governess was an immense privilege. It provided a level of literacy and numeracy that was inaccessible to the vast majority of the population. It opened doors to a world of literature and culture, while it may seem rigid and limited to us. For a Victorian child, it was the key that unlocked their place in the elite world they were born into. You sit at the table, your back straight, your hands clasped. The governess points to a passage in the book. Again, she says, her voice flat and devoid of emotion, from the beginning. And please, child, do try to enunciate. You take a deep breath and begin to read again, your small voice piping out the story of a boy who was saved from a life of crime by his timely memorization of the 10 Commandments. The clock on the mantelpiece ticks on, measuring out your childhood in slow, monotonous lessons. The long hours of lessons are not just a strain on your mind. They are a physical ordeal. Your body, young and full of energy, craves movement, but you are forced to sit still for hours on end. And not just still, but correctly still. Posture is a Victorian obsession, a physical expression of moral and social uprightness. A sloucher is not just a person with poor posture. They are a person of weak character, of slovenly habits, and of a questionable social standing. To combat the natural tendency of a child to fidget and slump, a variety of uncomfortable and often bizarre contraptions are employed. The simplest and most common of these is the backboard. It is, as its name suggests, a sled, unforgiving plank of wood. For a portion of each day, you might be required to sit with the backboard strapped to your torso, forcing your spine into a rigid, vertical line. It is impossible to slouch while wearing it. It is also impossible to breathe deeply or to move with any degree of comfort. You feel like a plank of wood yourself, stiff and unyielding. The governess watches you with a hawk's eye. If she sees you leaning forward over your copybook, you will hear a sharp tap on the table and a sterner, "Sit up, child. Do you want to grow into a hunchback?" The fear of physical deformity, particularly spinal curvature, was rampant. It was believed that poor posture in childhood could lead to a whole host of medical ailments in adulthood, from crushed internal organs to nervous disorders. This focus on posture wasn't limited to sitting. You are taught to walk correctly, to stand correctly, to hold your head high and your shoulders back at all times. If you are a girl, you might be made to practice walking around the nursery with a book balanced on your head. The goal is a graceful, gliding motion, a sign of ladylike refinement. Dropping the book is a moment of deep shame, a sign that you are clumsy and uncoordinated. Some of the tools used to enforce posture were even more extreme than the backboard. There were devices made of leather and steel, contraptions that looked like a cross between a harness and a piece of medical equipment. One such device was the shoulder brace, a harness that strapped around your chest and pulled your shoulders back with uncomfortable, relentless pressure. Another was the stocks, a wooden frame that held your head and neck in a fixed position while you sat at your desk. These were less common in the average nursery, but they were advertised in catalogs and child-rearing manuals as essential tools for any parent concerned with their child's physical development. A truly peculiar, untelling detail of this obsession comes from the world of furniture design. Chairs designed for children were often deliberately uncomfortable. They had straight, hard backs and flat seats. The idea of a soft, comfortable armchair for a child was anathema. Comfort was believed to encourage slouching and laziness. A chair was not for relaxing in. It was a tool for pastoral training. Every moment of your day, whether at lessons or at rest, was a potential opportunity for physical and moral improvement. The academic debate here is between the medical historians and the social historians. The medical historians look at these practices and see a genuine, if deeply flawed, attempt to solve real health problems. In an era before modern orthopodicus, conditions like scoliosis were poorly understood and greatly feared. These strange contraptions were the best tools they had, a pre-scientific attempt to impose order on the unruly human body. They see the backboard not as a torture device, but as a primitive form of physical therapy. The social historians, on the other hand, see something else entirely. They argue that the obsession with posture was about class. An upright, rigid posture was the physical marker of an aristocrat, of someone who did not have to perform manual labor. The lower classes, who spent their days bent over fields or factory machines, were often depicted as stooped and round-shouldered. By forcing an upper-class child into a rigid posture, you were physically inscribing their social superiority onto their body. You were teaching them to literally look down on the world. Their posture became a part of their uniform, a constant, silent declaration of their elite status. Use it there. The backboard digging into your shoulder blades, your copy of Gray's Elegy balanced precariously on your head. You try to focus on your French vocabulary, but most of your attention is consumed by the simple, agonizing task of remaining perfectly still and perfectly straight. Your muscles ache. Your skin itches where the straps dig in. You are a living statue, a testament to an era that believed the shortest distance to a strong character was a straight spine. Lessons are finally over. The governess has departed, leaving a wake of silence and the faint scent of lavender water. You are now released into a period of so-called free time before the midday meal. But this freedom is an illusion. You are not free to run, to shout, or to play in any way that might generate noise or mess. Your primary occupation during these hours is to master the difficult and essential art of invisibility, the cardinal rule of your childhood, the one that governs all others, is that children should be seen and not heard. This is not just a quaint saying. It is a fundamental principle of household management. The adult world, the world of your parents downstairs, is a realm of quiet order and serious purpose. The sound of a child's laughter, a sudden shriek of excitement, or the thought of running feet is a disruption, a tear in the fabric of domestic tranquility. Your job is to exist without leaving a trace, to be a silent, well-behaved ghost in your own home. You move about the nursery with a quiet, shuffling gait. You learn to close doors without letting them slam, to put down your toys without letting them clatter. You speak in a low, modulated voice, a nursery whisper. Loudness is a sign of a common, ill-bred child. You are constantly engaged in a process of self-monitoring, a state of hyper-awareness about the amount of noise you are making. Even your presence in a room is conditional. If your mother is entertaining guests in the drawing room, the nursery door is kept firmly shut. You are confined to your own quarters, lest a stray sound from your world should intrude upon the delicate social rituals of hers. You might hear the faint murmur of conversation and the tinkle of teacups from below, a world you are part of, but not yet permitted to join. When you are allowed into the adult sections of the house, You move with extreme caution. You do not touch the precious objects on the tables. You do not run your fingers along the expensive wallpaper. You do not, under any circumstances, interrupt an adult conversation. You stand quietly by the door, your hands clasped behind your back, waiting to be acknowledged. You are a visitor, a guest in the grander parts of your own home. This emphasis on quietness and stillness was partly practical. In a large house filled with servants, noise could be disruptive and confusing, but it was also deeply rooted in the Victorian ideal of childhood. The innocent child was a quiet, contemplative child. A noisy, boisterous child was seen as being closer to a state of animal nature, something that needed to be tamed and civilized. The process of growing up was the process of learning to suppress these natural but undesirable impulses. A strange and telling detail of this is how Victorians wrote about children in their letters and diaries. They often described a good child not in terms of their happiness or creativity, but in terms of their quietness. A phrase like "Little Arthur was as good as gold" today usually meant that Arthur had sat still for several hours without making a fuss. Goodness was equated with a lack of disruption. The historical debate around this seen and not heard philosophy is a lively one. Were Victorian parents simply uninterested in their children's inner lives, viewing them as decorative objects rather than as individuals with their own thoughts and feelings? This is the popular and somewhat critical view. It paints a picture of a cold, emotionally barren childhood where a child's personality was actively suppressed. However, a more nuanced historical perspective suggests that this might be a misunderstanding of their goals. Proponents of this view argue that the Victorians were not trying to crush a child's spirit, but to shape it for a very specific social world. In a society governed by complex rules of etiquette and decorum, the ability to be quiet, to listen, and to control one's impulses was a vital survival skill. A man who couldn't hold his tongue at a dinner party, or a woman who spoke out of turn, could suffer serious social consequences. By teaching a child to be seen and not heard, parents were providing them with an essential tool for navigating the intricate social landscape they would one day inherit. They were teaching the art of self-regulation, which they considered a cornerstone of a mature and successful adult life. You sit on the floor, carefully building a tower of wooden blocks, placing each one gently on top of the other to avoid a catastrophic and noisy collapse. The silence of the nursery is not a peaceful silence. It is a watchful silence, heavy with the weight of unspoken rules. You are a small island of quiet in a large, quiet house. You have learned your lesson well. You have learned that the greatest virtue a child can possess is the ability to disappear, to fold themselves up so tightly that they are barely there at all. The quiet monotony of your morning is about to be punctuated by its most significant and nerve-wracking event. It is time for the children's hour, the brief, formal period each day when you are brought down from the nursery to be presented to your parents. This is not a spontaneous, affectionate visit. It is a scheduled appointment, as formal as a business meeting. Nanny gives you a final, rigorous inspection. She straightens your collar, smooths your hair one last time, and checks your hands for any trace of dirt. "Now, mind your manners," she says, her voice slow and stern. "Speak only when spoken to, and do not fidget." You nod, your heart beginning to beat a little faster. This is a performance, and the audience is the most important one you will ever have. You descend the main staircase, one hand on the polished banister. This is the grand artery of the house, the world away from the plain, scrubbed wood stairs that led to the nursery. The air here is different, warmer, and smells of furniture polish into your mother's perfume. You feel like an ambassador from a foreign land, entering the court of a powerful king and queen. You are led into the drawing room or the morning room, depending on the time of day and your mother's schedule. Your parents are there. Your father might be standing by the fireplace, reading a newspaper. Your mother may be seated at her writing desk, attending to correspondence. They look up as you enter. "Ah, there you are, child," your father might say, lowering his newspaper. He regards you with a look that is not unkind, but is appraising. Like a farmer inspecting his prize livestock, your mother might offer you her cheek for a taste. Drybeck, good morning, my dear. Have you been a good child for Nanny and your governess? Yes. Murmur. You reply. Your voice is small, respectful pipe. This is the moment of your daily report. Your parents will ask you a series of formal questions. What did you learn in your lessons today? Recite the poem you have been memorizing. Show me your copybook. You present the evidence of your day's work, your hands trembling slightly as you hand your neatly written exercise book to your father. He examines it, his brow furrowed in concentration. Good. An improvement. Your S is still a little weak. See to it. Yes. The conversation is stiff, firm, and focused entirely on your progress and your behavior. There is no talk of your feelings, your games, or your dreams. The questions are designed to ascertain whether you are developing correctly, whether you are a credit to the family name. The entire encounter might last no more than 10 or 15 minutes. This ritual at children's hour is fascinating to historians of the family. It seems to encapsulate the strange blend of distance and duty that characterized Victorian parenting. The very fact that the visit was a scheduled event highlights the separation between the adult and child worlds. Yet, the fact that it happened at all shows a clear sense of parental responsibility. They were not absent parents. They were inspecting parents, overseeing their child's development from a managerial distance. Be small. Telling detail is what this hour was often called in parenting manuals of the day. The exhibition of the children. The term itself is revealing. You are not visiting. You are being exhibited. You are a product of the nursery, and your parents are the quality control inspectors, ensuring the product meets the required specifications. The academic debate here focuses on the emotional content of these interactions. Was this formal, structured time together a replacement for genuine intimacy? A hollow ritual that left both parents and children feeling unfulfilled? Many psychological historians would argue yes. They see it as a missed opportunity for bonding, a daily reinforcement of emotional distance. However, other historians argue that we are misinterpreting the emotional cues of a different culture. They suggest that within this formal structure, real affection and pride could be communicated. Dayfatherism, an improvement might be the Victorian equivalent of wow. That's fantastic. I'm so proud of you. A mother's gentle smile as you correctly recite your poem could be a moment of profound and genuine connection. They argue that Victorians expressed emotion in more subtle, coded ways, and that we should not mistake their restraint for a lack of feeling. The very act of taking time out of their busy schedules to focus solely on the child was, in itself, an expression of love. The audience is drawing to a close. Your father has returned to his newspaper, a clear signal that the meeting is over. Your mother gives you a final, dismissive nod. Very well, dear. You may return to the nursery now. Do try not to make a mess before luncheon. Yes, Emma. You curtsy or bow and retreat, walking backwards for a few steps as if leaving the presence of royalty. Before turning and making your escape, you climb the stairs back to the familiar territory of the nursery, your heart rate slowly returning to normal. You have passed the inspection. You have performed your role successfully. You have been seen. You have been heard, briefly, and now you can once again disappear. Your brief audience with your parents is followed by another ordeal, one that is in some ways even more terrifying. The midday meal, or luncheon, taken in the main dining room. This does not happen every day. It is a privilege, a special occasion, and a test. It is your chance to demonstrate that you have mastered the complex etiquette required to eat in civilized society. You are led to the dining room by Nanny. The room itself is imposing. A vast, dark mahogany table, polished to a mirror-like shine, dominates the space. It is surrounded by heavy, high-backed chairs. The walls are covered in dark, black wallpaper, and a massive, ornate sideboard stands against one wall, laden with gleaming silver dishes. The air is still and silent, heavy with the ghosts of 1,000 formal dinners. Your parents are already seated at either end of the long table. You are placed in a chair on one side, a lonely outpost between them. A special cushion has been placed on your chair to raise you to the correct height, but you still feel dwarfed by the scale of the room. The table before you is a bewildering landscape of metal and porcelain. There seems to be a terrifying number of forks, knives, and spoons of all different sizes, arranged in a precise, geometric pattern around your plate. You know from Nanny's endless drills that each one has a specific purpose. There is a fish fork, a meat fork, a salad fork. There is a soup spoon, a dessert spoon. To use the wrong utensil for the wrong course is a catastrophic social error, a sign of poor breeding that would bring shame upon your entire family. A servant, a footman in livery, moves silently around the table, serving the first course. It is a clear soup. You pick up your soup spoon, your hand trembling slightly. You remember Nanny's instructions. Spoon away from the bowl. Child, and never, ever blow on it. One must wait for it to cool. You eat your soup in agonizingly slow, silent spoonfuls, your eyes fixed on your bowl, terrified of making a single splash or scrape. The meal proceeds through several courses. Boiled fish, followed by roasted meat with a side of overcooked vegetables. Each course is a new test. You must know how to cut your meat into small, manageable pieces. You must know how to use your fork to push your peas onto your knife, a surprisingly difficult maneuver. You must chew with your mouth closed, making no sound. You must not speak unless spoken to, and if you are asked a question, you must answer it concisely. After you have completely swallowed your food, the conversation between your parents flows over your head. They speak of politics, of social engagements, of household matters. You are not a participant. You are a silent observer, focusing all your energy on the mechanical process of eating correctly. A particularly strange and anxiety-inducing piece of dining etiquette was the silent toast. At some meals, your father might raise his glass of wine, catch the eye of your mother, and take a sip, all without saying a word. This was a polite, formal gesture, and as a child, you were expected to understand and respect this moment of silent communication, ceasing your own eating until the gesture was complete. Historians who study the history of manners see the Victorian dining table as a theater of social performance. The elaborate rules and rituals were not just about hygiene. They were about reinforcing social hierarchy and demonstrating one's civilized nature. The ability to navigate this complex etiquette was a clear marker of belonging to the upper class. It was a skill that had to be learned and practiced, a secret code that separated the well-bred from the common. For a child, the dining room was the ultimate examination hall for this code. There is a debate about the psychological impact of these high-pressure meals. Some historians argue that it created a lifelong, anxious relationship with food for many people. Food was not a source of pleasure or communal joy. It was a source of potential social humiliation. The focus was not on the taste of the food, but on the correctness of its consumption. Other scholars argue that this is an over-dramatization. They contend that, for a Victorian child, learning these rules was simply a part of growing up, no different from learning to read or write. It was a practical skill set needed for their future life. They argue that children are adaptable and that they likely internalize these rules from a young age, performing them without the level of anxiety we might project onto them. The pressure was real, but it was a normal and expected part of their world. You have made it to the final course, a soup pudding. It is heavy, dense, and bland. You eat it dutifully. Finally, the ordeal is over. Your mother dabs her lips with her napkin and gives a slight nod to Nanny. It is the signal for your dismissal. You may be excused. You slide off your chair, curtsy to your parents, and follow Nanny out of the silent, imposing room, back to the safety and relative freedom of the nursery. You have survived the test. You have eaten a meal without bringing shame upon your house. You are not sure if you have enjoyed a single bite. After the high-stakes pressure of the dining room, the afternoon offers a change of scenery, though not necessarily a release into joyful freedom. It is time for your daily walk. This is not a casual, playful run. It is a structured, formal procession, Another opportunity to be seen and to perform your role as a well-behaved child. The ritual of preparation is almost as elaborate as getting dressed in the morning. Nanny and the under-nursemaid descend upon you. Over your already restrictive indoor clothes, more layers are added. A heavy woolen coat, a thick scarf wrapped tightly around your neck, a pair of leather gloves, and, most importantly, a hat. A child of your class would never be seen outdoors without a hat. A sailor-style hat for a boy, perhaps, or a bonnet tied with a silk ribbon for a girl. You are bundled and buttoned until you can barely move. A small, walking upholstery project. If you have younger siblings, they will be placed in a large, ornate, and fantastically impractical baby carriage, known as a perambulator, or pram. These were new and fashionable inventions. Heavy contraptions of wicker and steel that were difficult to steer and looked more like royal chariots than baby strollers. The procession begins. Nanny leads the way. Her back rambled straight, her expression severe. You walk beside her, holding her hand. You are not allowed to run ahead. You are not allowed to dawdle. You must walk at a steady, sedate pace. If you have a hoop and stick, a popular toy of the era, you may be allowed to bowl it along the path, but only in a controlled, forward-moving manner. Aimless, chaotic play is frowned upon. Your destination is the local park, but the park is not a playground in the modern sense. There are no swings, no slides, no climbing frames. It is a carefully manicured landscape of green lawns, gravel paths, and formal flower. The lawns are for looking at, not for playing on. The flowers are most certainly not for picking. The park is an outdoor drawing room, a place for polite society to see and be seen. You promenade along the main paths, a miniature adult out for a constitutional. You pass other nannies with their charges, other families out for a stroll. Nanny will nod stiffly to the nanny she knows. Your mother, if she has joined you, will smile and greet other ladies. It is a complex social ballet, and you are one of the silent dancers. The primary purpose of the walk is to get fresh air. There was a pervasive belief that the air indoors, thick with the fumes of coal fires and gas lamps, was unhealthy. A daily dose of outdoor air was considered essential for a child's health, a way to build up a robust constitution. However, this fresh air was to be taken in a controlled and civilized manner. One of the great unspoken crimes of the daily walk was getting dirty. To return from the park with a smudge of dirt on your coat or a scuff on your boots was a sign of a major failure on Nanny's part. It meant she had allowed you to be unruly, to behave like a common child. As a result, your interactions with the natural world are heavily policed. You cannot climb a tree. You cannot splash in a puddle. You cannot even sit on the grass, lest you stain your clothes. Your play is a sterile, hands-off appreciation of a nature that has been thoroughly tamed and fenced in. Historians debate the true purpose of these ritualized walks. Were they genuinely for the child's benefit? A well-intentioned, if overly structured, attempt to provide exercise and fresh air? Or were they, once again, about social display? The park was one of the few public spaces where the children of the elite were put on view. Your immaculate clothing, your perfect posture, your quiet, orderly behavior, all of it was a public advertisement for your family's status and respectability. The daily walk was a parade of the next generation of the ruling class. A quirky detail that highlights this is the fashion of the perambulator. Families would spend enormous sums on prams, choosing models with the most elaborate wickerwork, the plushest upholstery, and the most elegant parasols. The pram was not just a tool for transporting a baby. It was a fashion accessory, a status symbol on wheels. Much like a luxury car today, you walk along the gravel path, your hands sweating inside your tight leather glove. You watch a stray dog joyfully chase a squirrel across the forbidden lawn and feel a pang of envy. Your walk is not about joy or exploration. It is about control, presentation, and the endless, exhausting performance of being a perfect Victorian child. The fresh air you are getting feels as stuffy and restrictive as the drawing room you left behind. You return from the highly structured play of your walk to the highly structured play of the nursery. This is the part of the day when you are permitted to interact with your toys. But a Victorian toy chest is not a treasure trove of anarchic, imaginative fun. It is, more often than not, a cabinet of moral and educational lessons disguised as playthings. You kneel on the floor before a large wooden box. Nanny lifts the heavy lid, and the scent of old wooden paint fills the air. The toys inside are beautiful, well-crafted, and deeply serious. There is very little that is soft or cuddly. Your world is not one of plush teddy bears, a toy that wouldn't be invented until the turn of the century. Your companions are made of wood, porcelain, and lead. One of your most prized possessions is a doll. If you are a girl, she is a lady doll, with a delicate, unsmiling porcelain face, real human hair, and an elaborate wardrobe of miniature adult clothing. She is not a baby to be nurtured. She is a small adult to be managed. Playing with her is a lesson in domesticity and fashion. You spend your time changing her clothes, arranging her in stiff, formal poses, then hosting imaginary, and very proper, tea parties. If you are a boy, you might have lead soldiers, no dynamic, action-oriented figures, but perfectly uniform toy soldiers, which you arrange in neat, orderly rows for inspection and parades. Playing with them is a lesson in military discipline and hierarchy. Many of your toys are explicitly educational. You have a set of wooden blocks, but they are not playing cubes. Each block is engraved with a letter of the alphabet, the number, or the moral maxim. As you build your tower, you are meant to be absorbing the foundations of literacy and numeracy. You have a jigsaw puzzle, but the picture it forms is not a cartoon character. It is a map of the British Empire, with all the colonies colored in a cheerful, possessive pink. As you piece it together, you are learning a lesson in geography and the glorious reach of your nation's power. Even games of chance are infused with a heavy dose of morality. You have a board game, something like the Mansion of Happiness or the Game of Virtue rewarded. It is a simple roll and move game, but the squares you land on are not neutral. Landing on a square marked idleness or covetousness sends you back several spaces. Landing on a square marked honesty or piety allows you to advance. A game is a thinly veiled allegory for life itself, a journey where good behavior is rewarded and sin is punished. The winner is not the luckiest player, but the most virtuous. There is no escaping the constant moral instruction, not even in your games. A fascinating and slightly creepy example of a toy from this era is the magic lantern. This was an early form of slide projector, a popular source of home entertainment. But the slideshows for children were rarely frivolous. They would often feature terrifying, morally instructive stories. One popular series of slides was called The Drunkard's Progress, showing the step-by-step decline of a man who takes to drink, ending with him destitute and his family in ruins. It was a horror movie presented as a children's toy, designed to frighten you into a lifetime of sobriety. The academic debate here centers on the very definition of play. What did the Victorians think play was for? The modern view, influenced by psychology, is that play is essential for a child's cognitive and emotional development. It's a way for children to explore their creativity, process their emotions, and make sense of the world on their own terms. The Victorian view was very different. For them, play was not an end in itself. It was a tool for education and character formation. Idleness was a sin, and unstructured, purposeless play was seen as a form of idleness. Therefore, a good toy was one that taught a lesson, reinforced a moral, or practiced a useful skill. This is why their toys seemed so serious and didactic to us. They were not designed to be fun in the way we understand it. They were extensions of the classroom, tools for shaping a child into a proper adult. Some historians argue that this view is too simplistic. They point out that, despite the best efforts of the adults, children will always find a way to play creatively. They suggest that a child with a moralistic board game could still invent their own silly rules, and a girl with a prim lady doll could still have her enact wild, imaginative, and highly improper adventures when Nanny wasn't looking. They argue that we should not underestimate a child's capacity to subvert the educational intentions of their toys and create their own secret worlds of fun. Use it on the nursery floor, arranging your lead soldiers into a perfect defensive square. You are learning about military strategy, about order, about discipline, but in the quiet, unobstructed corners of your mind, you are also giving them names and personalities, imagining they're heroic, and probably very noisy, charge against an unseen enemy. Even in this heavily policed world, the spark of true, chaotic play still flickers. As the afternoon wears on, a quiet, creeping loneliness might settle over you. You are surrounded by people, Nanny, the governess, the under-nursemaid, your siblings, but you exist in a world strangely devoid of physical affection. There are no spontaneous hugs, no comforting cuddles on a parent's lap, no casual, reassuring pats on the back. Your world is, for the most part, a world without hugs. This was not necessarily because your parents and caregivers were cold, unfeeling people. It was a reflection of a deeply ingrained cultural belief that physical affection, especially when given in excess, was bad for a child's character. The prevailing wisdom of the era, found in countless parenting manuals and medical advice columns, was that coddling a child would spoil them. It would make them weak, dependent, and demanding. A child who cried was not to be immediately swept up and comforted. They were to be left alone, to learn to self-soothe. Crying was seen as a form of tyranny, a way for a baby to manipulate its parents. To give in was to lose the first and most important battle in the war of discipline. A child who was hurt in a minor fall was not to be fussed over. They were to be told to be brave, to take it like a little man, even if they were a little girl, and to get on with it. Pain was a part of life, and learning to endure it stoically was a vital life lesson. The relationship with your own body is therefore a distant and formal one. It is a thing to be washed, dressed, fed, and disciplined, but not a thing to be lovingly touched. The only physical contact you might have with your parents is the brief, formal peck on the cheek during the children's hour, or a cool, dry handshake before bed. Even Nanny, the person who provides your most intimate daily care, is likely to be physically reserved. Her touch is functional, buttoning your boots, scrubbing your back, not affectionate. This emotional and physical distance is perhaps one of the most striking differences between Victorian child rearing and our own. It stemmed from a different understanding of love. To the Victorians, love was expressed not through physical intimacy, but through duty. A father showed his love by working hard to provide for his family. A mother showed her love by managing the household efficiently and ensuring her children were well-behaved and morally upright. A nanny showed her love by keeping you clean, healthy, and safe. They were demonstrating their love through their actions, through the structure and security they provided. To them, this was a far deeper and more meaningful form of love than a fleeting, sentimental hug. A bizarre and poignant detail that illustrates this view comes from the practice of post-mortem photography. In an era of high infant and child mortality, it was common for families to have a photograph taken of their deceased child. In these sad, haunting images, the child is often posed as if they are sleeping, sometimes held in the arms of a grieving mother or seated with their siblings. For many families, this would be the only photograph they ever had of their child. It was a way of preserving their memory, a testament to their love. But the fact that the most intimate and loving portrait was often one taken after death speaks volumes about the physical restraint that governed the living. Historians are deeply divided on the psychological consequences of this hugs-off policy, drawing on the work of 20th century psychologists like John Bowlby. Many argue that this lack of physical affection could have been deeply damaging. They contend that it led to what they call an attachment disorder, creating adults who struggled with intimacy, who had a stiff upper lip because they had been taught to suppress their emotions from infancy, and who found it difficult to be physically demonstrative with their own children, thus perpetuating the cycle. However, other historians caution against applying modern psychological models to the past. They argue that this no-coddling approach should be seen within its own historical context. It was a world that was physically much harder and more dangerous than ours. Life was precarious. The Victorians believed they were preparing their children for this harsh reality by making them tough, resilient, and self-reliant. They were not trying to create emotionally stunted adults. They were trying to create survivors. They argue that humans are adaptable, and that Victorian children found other ways to get their emotional needs met, perhaps through intense friendships with siblings or in the secret, imaginative worlds of their play. You sit quietly in a chair, reading your book of moral tales. You feel a sudden, inexplicable wave of sadness, a child's deep and formless longing for a comfort they don't have the words to ask for. You look at Nanny, busy with her mending on the other side of the room. You wish you could go and bury your head in her lap, but you know, with absolute certainty, that this is not allowed. It would be a breach of protocol. It would be making a fuss. So you swallow the feeling, push it down deep inside, and turn the page. The hero of the story, a brave little boy, is facing down a grizzly bear without shedding a single tear. You try to be more like him. In the quiet, orderly world of the nursery, illness is a constant, low-level threat and a source of great anxiety. A simple cough, a fever, or a stomachache could be the first sign of something far more serious, like diphtheria, scarlet fever, or tuberculosis. Nanny, who doubles as the family's frontline medic, is always on high alert for any symptom of sickness, and her medicine cabinet is stocked with a truly terrifying array of remedies. If you develop a cough, you will not be given a sweet, cherry-flavored syrup. You will be given a spoonful of a dark, viscous liquid from a bottle that promises to be a pectoral or a balsam. The taste is bitter and strange, a complex mixture of herbs and alcohol, but the secret ingredient, the one that makes it so effective at suppressing your cough and making you feel sleepy and compliant, is often an opiate. Many popular children's cough syrups, like Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, contain significant amounts of morphine or raw opium. They were incredibly effective at stopping a cough, but they were also highly addictive and, in some cases, lethal. For teething pain, Nanny might rub your gums with a powder that contains cocaine. For a headache, you might be given a tonic that includes cannabis. For nervousness or over-minus excitement, you could be administered a dose of bromide, a powerful sedative. These were not illegal back-alley substances. They were common, over-the-counter patent medicines, sold in respectable chemists' shops and advertised in family magazines. The labels rarely listed the active ingredients, instead making vague, miraculous claims about their effectiveness, often attributed to a secret Indian recipe or the discovery of a famous physician. Your nanny is not a poisoner. She is acting in good faith, using the most modern and popular medicines available to her. The understanding of pharmacology was in its infancy. The concept of addiction was poorly understood, and the long-term effects of these powerful drugs were unknown. Opiates were seen as a gift from God, a powerful tool for alleviating pain and suffering in a world that was full of it. They were used for everything from diarrhea to insomnia. A particularly strange and dangerous practice was the use of mercury. A compound called calomel, which was mercury chloride, was a common ingredient in teething powders and laxatives for children. It was believed to be a purgative, cleansing the body of toxins, while it was certainly effective at causing a dramatic reaction in the digestive system. It was also a potent neurotoxin. Many children suffered from a condition called pink disease, characterized by pink, peeling hands and feet, irritability, and muscle weakness, which we now know was a classic symptom of chronic mercury poisoning. The history of medicine is a field where historians must tread very carefully. It is easy for us, with our modern scientific knowledge, to look back and be horrified by these practices. The debate among medical historians is not about whether these treatments were dangerous. They clearly were, but about how we should interpret the actions of the people who used them. Was this a dark age of medicine, where doctors and parents were essentially poisoning their children out of sheer ignorance? Some historians take this view, emphasizing the lack of regulation, the wild, unsubstantiated claims of the patent medicine industry, and the harm that was done. They paint a picture of a public at the mercy of quacks and dangerous nostrums. However, a more recent school of thought argues for a more complex understanding. They point out that in a world without antibiotics or effective vaccines, doctors and parents had very few tools to combat disease. These powerful, symptom-suppressing drugs, for all their dangers, were often the only thing that provided any relief. When your child is screaming in pain from an ear infection, a dose of an opium-based syrup that allows them to sleep might seem like a miracle, not a menace. These historians argue that we should see these practices not as foolish, but as a rational, if desperate, response to the medical realities of the time. They were choosing what they believed to be the lesser of two evils. You sit propped up in your bed, a blanket wrapped around your shoulders. You have a slight fever, and your throat is sore. Nanny stands over you, a spoon in her hand. "Now, open up." "Dear," she says, her voice firm but not unkind. "A spoonful of Dr. Abernathy's celebrated elixir will have you right as rain in no time." You open your mouth obediently and swallow the bitter, syrupy liquid. You don't know what's in it. You only know that soon the scratchiness in your throat will fade, and a warm, heavy, pleasant fog will descend upon your mind, pulling you down into a long and dreamless sleep. The rules that govern your life are not just about posture, politeness, or cleanliness. They are about something much deeper and more terrifying, the state of your immortal soul. You live under the constant, watchful eye not just of Nanny, but of God himself, and every moment of your day is a potential battleground between good and evil. The moral pressure on you is immense. You are taught from your earliest days that you are born with a sinful nature. Your natural impulses, your anger, your selfishness, your laziness, are not just childish phases. They are evidence of this inherent corruption. Your entire childhood is seen as a project of moral reformation. A long, difficult struggle to tame the wickedness within you and cultivate a virtuous Christian character. Your day is bookended with prayer. You kneel by your bedside in the morning and in the evening, reciting formal prayers that remind you of your duty to God and your parents. But the religious instruction doesn't stop there. It is woven into the very fabric of your life. The stories you read are moral fables. The proverbs you copy are religious maxims. Even a simple walk in the park can become a lesson on the glory of God's creation. The concept of sin is not an abstract theological idea. It is a real and present danger. The lie is not just a lie. It is a black mark on your soul. A fit of temper is not just a tantrum. It is the devil finding a foothold in your heart. You are taught to constantly examine your own thoughts and actions, to engage in a relentless process of self-scrutiny. Did you feel a pang of envy when your brother received a new toy? That was a sin. Did you have a selfish thought about wanting the biggest piece of cake? That was a sin. Your inner world is a courtroom, and you are both the defendant and the prosecutor. The consequences of sin are presented to you in terrifyingly vivid terms. You hear stories from the Bible, from books like Pilgrim's Progress, and from grim, moralistic tales about the eternal damnation that awaits wicked children. Hell is a real place, a fiery pit of everlasting torment, and a single, unminus repented sin could be enough to send you there. This fear is a powerful to love discipline, far more effective than any rap on the knuckles. A curious and revealing detail of this moral landscape is the sentimental deathbed scene, a hugely popular trope in Victorian art and literature. Countless stories and poems were written about the death of a virtuous, angelic child. In these tales, the dying child is not frightened, but is serene and saintly, comforting their grieving parents and looking forward to being reunited with Jesus in heaven. The most famous example is the death of little Ava in Uncle Tom's Cabin. These stories were meant to be inspiring and comforting, but they also sent a powerful message. The best thing a child could do was to be so good that they were ready to die at any moment. It created a strange and morbid ideal of childhood perfection. Historians of religion and culture debate the psychological impact of this intense moral upbringing. One school of thought argues that it was a source of profound and lasting anxiety. They contend that it burdened children with a level of guilt and fear that was psychologically damaging. By teaching a child that their own nature was inherently sinful, it fostered a deep-seated sense of shame and inadequacy. It created a world of scrupulous, fearful individuals, perpetually worried about their own salvation. However, another perspective argues that this view is too one-sided. They suggest that for many Victorians, religion was not just a source of fear, it was a source of profound comfort, meaning, and strength. In a world filled with uncertainty, disease, and death, a strong religious faith provided a framework for understanding life and the promise of a better world to come. It gave people a clear moral compass and a sense of purpose. For a child, the idea of a loving, watchful God could be a source of comfort in a world where their own parents were often distant. The structure and ritual of religion could provide a sense of stability and order. You sit in the nursery on a quiet afternoon, trying to be good, but a dark thought enters your mind. You are angry with Nanny for scolding you earlier. You wish something bad would happen to her. The thought is like a poisonous snake, and you are immediately consumed with guilt and terror. What if God heard you? What if you are a truly wicked child, destined for the fires below? You quickly bow your head and whisper a frantic, silent prayer, begging for forgiveness, promising to be better. You are a small soldier in a great spiritual war, and the enemy is inside you. Your siblings are not your playmates, at least not in the modern sense. They are your closest rivals, your companions in the shared, quiet world of the nursery, and the first people against whom you measure your own progress and failings. The nursery is a self-contained society, and it has its own rigid hierarchy, with your relationship to your brothers and sisters governed by a complex set of unwritten rules. The most important factor in this hierarchy is age. The eldest child, particularly the eldest son, holds a position of authority. He is the first to be breeched, the first to leave the nursery for the harsher world of a boys' boarding school. He is a figure of awe and some intimidation. You are expected to defer to him, to give him the best toys, to listen to his opinions. A squabble between siblings is often resolved by Nanny with a simple, unassailable edict. He is the eldest. He knows best. Brothers and sisters are largely segregated. Once a boy is old enough, he is given more freedom. His play is deemed to be rougher, and his education takes a different, more serious track. Girls are kept more closely confined to the nursery and the drawing room. Their activities focused on developing the quiet, domestic accomplishments that will make them good wives. You may live in the same house, but you inhabit different worlds, with different expectations on different futures mapped out for you from birth. The relationship between you and your siblings is therefore often formal and surprisingly distant. You do not share secrets in the dead of night or engage in rough-and-tumble play. Your interactions are mediated by Nanny and the governess. You play alongside each other more than you play with each other, each of you absorbed in your own quiet, approved activity. This formality is amplified by a lack of privacy. You may share a bedroom, a washstand, a table. You are rarely alone. This constant proximity does not necessarily breed intimacy. It can breed competition and resentment. You are in a perpetual, low-grade contest for the limited resources of adult approval. Who is the quietest at breakfast? Whose penmanship is the neatest? Who can recite their Bible verse without stumbling? Your siblings' successes are a mirror reflecting your own potential failures. A fascinating and slightly strange detail about sibling relationships in this era is the practice of hand-me-down clothing. While your family is wealthy, thrift is still considered a virtue. Clothes are made to last and are passed down from one child to the next. This means you might spend a significant portion of your childhood wearing the exact same outfits your older brother or sister wore. This creates a literal, physical connection to your sibling, but it also reinforces the hierarchy. You are always, in a sense, walking in their shadow, filling a space that they have already outgrown. Historians who study the family have different interpretations of this sibling dynamic. One perspective is that the nursery environment, with its strict rules and emotional restraint, actually fostered a unique and powerful form of sibling solidarity. They argue that because children were so isolated from their parents, their brothers and sisters became their primary emotional allies. They were the only other people who truly understood the pressures and anxieties of their world. They might not have been able to express this bond openly, but it was there, forged in the shared experience of surviving a Victorian childhood. The opposing view is that the system was designed to create rivalry, not solidarity, by constantly comparing children to one another, by praising one for their quietness while scolding another for their fidgeting. Parents and nannies created a competitive environment. This was seen as a way to improve the stock, to encourage each child to strive for the ideal of perfection. This perspective suggests that the formality and distance between siblings were not an accident, but a deliberate outcome of a child-rearing philosophy that valued individual achievement over group cohesion. It was another way of teaching you that you were, ultimately, on your own in the struggle for moral and social success. You are playing a quiet game of drafts with your sister. She captures one of your pieces and gives a small, almost imperceptible, smile of triumph. You feel a hot flash of anger and frustration. You want to knock the board over. You want to tell her she cheated, but you don't. You look over at Nanny, who is watching you from her chair by the fire. You take a deep breath, suppress the feeling, and say, in a quiet, formal voice, "A very clever move, sister." She nods, equally formally, and you continue the game. The silent, invisible war between you playing out in the moves of the black and white counters. Every so often, the quiet, predictable routine of your life is disrupted by a particularly stressful event. A visitor, not an adult visitor for your parents, but another child, the son or daughter of your parents' friends, who has been brought to the nursery for a formal play-minus date. This is not an occasion for fun and games. It is a high-stakes social performance, a test of your training in the art of miniature adulthood. The preparations are extensive. The nursery is tidied to within an inch of its life. You are put into your very best clothes, the ones usually reserved for Sundays or special family occasions. Your hair is brushed until your scalp tingles. Nanny gives you a final, stern briefing on the rules of hospitality. You are to be gracious. You are to share your toys, especially the best ones. You are to let your guest win any game you play. Your job is not to have fun, but to be a good host, which is another way of saying you must make your family look good. The visitor arrives, equally scrubbed and polished, equally terrified. You are formally introduced by your respective nannies, like two tiny, reluctant diplomats. Master Thomas, may I present Miss Eleanor? Eleanor, this is Master Thomas. You shake hands, a strange and awkward ritual for two small children. How do you do? You asked, as you have been taught. How do you do? Your guest replies. An awkward silence descends. The two of you stand there, two small, overdressed strangers, while the nannies watch from the sidelines, ready to pounce upon any breach of etiquette. You are expected to entertain your guests. You might offer them a tour of your toy chest, formally presenting each toy as if it were a museum artifact. This is my doll. Her name is Gwendolyn, and these are her clothes. This is my box of lead soldiers. They are modeled on the Queen's own royal fusiliers. You might play a game, but it is a game fraught with social peril. If you play the game of virtue rewarded, you must subtly contrive to let your guest land on all the virtue squares, ensuring their victory. Their happiness and good opinion of you are paramount. If you look at a picture book together, you must hold it carefully, turn the pages slowly, and offer your guest the better view. The conversation is as stilted and formal as the play. You ask polite, pre-rehearsed questions. Have you been to the pantomime this year? Is your new governess satisfactory? You are two small adults performing a script, the content of which is far less important than the polite, mannered way in which it is delivered. A curious detail of this social ritual is the food. A special tea will be served in honor of the guest. This is not the usual plain bread and butter. There might be tiny, crustless sandwiches, a seed cake, or even small iced fairy cakes. This is a rare and exciting treat, but you cannot show your excitement. You must politely offer the best cakes to your guest first, taking the smallest or plainest one for yourself. To grab the most appealing treat would be a horrifying display of greed and poor breeding. Historians who study social customs see these children's visits as a crucial training ground for the adult social world. The rules of hospitality, of making polite conversation, of putting a guest's comfort before your own. These were the essential skills for navigating the complex web of social calls and dinner parties that defined upper-class life. By forcing children to practice these rituals from a young age, parents were ensuring they would be able to function in their own social sphere later in life. It was a practical rehearsal for their future roles. The debate among historians is about the nature of childhood friendship in this context. Was it possible for genuine, spontaneous friendship to blossom in such a controlled and artificial environment? Some argue that it was very difficult. The constant pressure to perform, the lack of privacy, and the emphasis on politeness over real communication may have made it hard for children to form authentic connections. Friendships were often strategic, arranged by parents with an eye towards the social standing of the other family. Others argue that we shouldn't underestimate children's resilience. They suggest that despite the formal setting, children could still find moments of genuine connection. They should. Secret giggle over Nanny's stern expression, a moment of true, shared excitement over a picture in a book. These small sparks of authentic feeling could still ignite, even in the most restrictive of drawing rooms. The formal structure was the stage, but the children were still the actors, and they could sometimes go off minus script. The visitor's nanny finally stands up. Come along there. Thomas, we must not outstay our welcome. Visit is over. You shake hands again. Formally, it was a pleasure to receive you. You say, reciting your line, thank you for your hospitality. He replies, and then he is gone. You are left alone in the unnaturally tidy nursery, exhausted from the effort of your performance. You did not make a new friend. You completed a social obligation. Just when you think you might be safe from further scrutiny, a new terror looms. Your parents are hosting a dinner party, and you are to be put on display before the adult meal begins. During the period when guests are arriving and mingling in the drawing room, you will be summoned from the nursery for a brief and deeply stressful public appearance. This is a step beyond the daily parental audience. This is a performance for strangers. Nanny goes into a frenzy of preparation. You are once again dressed in your absolute finest. A velvet suit for a boy, or a silk frock for a girl. Clothes that are even more restrictive and uncomfortable than your daily wear. Your hair is curled with hot tongs, a painful process that smells of burning and makes your eyes water. You are being transformed from a child into a decorative object. Nanny drills you one last time on your performance piece. For weeks, your governess has been preparing you for this moment. You have been forced to memorize a long, sentimental poem or practice a simple piece on the pianoforte. You know the words of the notes by heart, but the fear of forgetting them in front of an audience makes your stomach churn. Now, remember to stand up straight, speak clearly, and for heaven's sake, do not mumble. Nanny instructs, her voice a nervous whisper, and you will bow, or curtsy, when you are done. The entire family is counting on you not to be a disappointment. You are laid downstairs, your heart pounding a frantic rhythm against your ribs. The drawing room is a blaze of gaslight and a cacophony of adult conversation and laughter. The air is thick with the scent of perfume, cigars, and beeswax. The room is filled with giants, men in dark evening dress and women in voluminous gowns with rustling bustles. They all seem to turn and look at you as you enter, their faces a blur of smiles and appraising glances. Your mother detaches herself from a group and glides towards you. Ah, here is my little songbird, she says, her voice artificially bright. She takes your hand and leads you to the center of the room. Near the pianoforte, the conversation dies down. A hush falls over the room. Every eye is on you. Our little Eleanor has prepared a small recitation for you all. Your mother announces. You stand there, frozen in the spotlight, your hands clammy, Your throat suddenly dry. The faces of the guests swim before you. You take a deep breath, trying to remember the first line of the poem. It is a tricky piece about a robin who dies in the snow, a guaranteed tearjerker. You open your mouth and begin to speak, your voice a tiny, trembling squeak in the vast, silent room. This ritual of the drawing room performance was a cornerstone of upper-class family life. Each child's accomplishments were not for their own benefit. They were a form of social currency for their parents. A well-recited poem or a flawlessly played piano piece was a public demonstration of a family's culture, refinement, and wealth. It proved that you could afford a good governess and that you had the leisure time to devote to such non-essential skills. Your performance was a reflection of your parents' success. A particularly telling detail is the choice of material. Children were rarely asked to perform something cheerful or funny. The preferred pieces were often deeply sentimental, tragic, or pious. A poem about a dying orphan, a song about the beauty of heaven. This kind of material was thought to demonstrate a child's sensitivity and moral depth. It played into the romantic Victorian idea of the child as a pure, innocent being, closer to God than the cynical adults in the room. The historical debate here revolves around the child's own experience. Were these performances a source of pride and accomplishment for the child? Or were they a source of intense anxiety and psychological pressure? The memoirs of many adults who grew up in this era are filled with accounts of the terror of these public recitals. They describe stage fright, the humiliation of forgetting a line, and the desperate, overwhelming need to please their parents and avoid public shame. It seems, for many, to have been a deeply unpleasant experience. However, other historians argue that we should not discount the possibility of genuine pride. A child who performed well and was met with a round of applause and praise from the assembled guests would surely have felt a powerful sense of achievement. In a world where direct praise from parents was rare, this public adulation might have been a heady and intoxicating experience. It could have been a powerful motivator, encouraging a child to work hard and excel. For some, it may have been the moment they shone brightest. You reach the end of your poem. Your voice has grown a little stronger as you've gone on. You remember to make the final gesture, a sad little wave of the hand to indicate the death of the robin. You finish with the last line, your voice dropping to a pious whisper. You stand there, your heart hammering, and then a wave of applause, a soft patter of gloved hands, breaks the silence. The guests are smiling. Your mother is smiling. You have done it. You have not been a disappointment. You give a wobbly curtsy and are finally, mercifully, allowed to escape back to the nursery. Throughout your highly structured day, there is one figure who is a constant, if distant, presence. He is the ultimate source of authority in the house, the sun around which your small family planet orbits. Yet he is the person you know the least. This is your father. Your interactions with him are rare, formal, and freighted with immense significance. You see him at the daily children's hour, where he inspects your progress. You see him at the head of the dining table, a silent, imposing figure, but you do not know him. You do not know what makes him laugh, what his favorite foods are, or what he thinks about when he stares into the fire. He is not a playmate or a confidant. He is the patriarch. His domain is the world outside the home, the world of business, of politics, of the empire. He leaves the house early in the morning and often returns late in the evening, long after you have been put to bed. His world is a mystery to you, a place of serious, masculine endeavor that you are not privy to. His study is a sacred, forbidden territory, a room filled with the smell of leather, tobacco smoke, and important papers that you are never, under any circumstances, to touch. His role in your upbringing is that of a remote, godlike authority. Nanny might be the one who administers daily discipline, but she does so with the implicit backing of your father's power. The most terrifying threat in the nursery is not a rap on the knuckles, but the words, "I shall have to tell your father." This is the nuclear option, a threat so dire it can quell any rebellion. The idea of being summoned to your father's study for a formal reprimand is the stuff of nightmares. This paternal distance was a product of the Victorian ideal of separate spheres. The home was the woman's sphere, a haven of peace, piety, and domesticity. The world was the man's sphere, a brutal, competitive arena where he had to fight to make a living and a name for his family. The father's role was to be the provider and the protector, to shield his wife and children from the harsh realities of the world by succeeding in it. His love was demonstrated by his success. A bigger house, more servants, a more prestigious address. These were the tangible proofs of his paternal devotion. This is not to say that fathers felt no affection for their children. The diaries and letters of the period are often filled with expressions of deep love and pride. A father might write movingly about his hopes for his son's future or his daughter's beauty, but this emotion was rarely expressed directly to the child. The prevailing culture of emotional restraint, particularly for men, meant that feelings were to be kept under tight control. A father's relationship with his children was meant to be one of authority and guidance, not one of emotional intimacy. A curious detail that illustrates this distance is the way children often referred to their father. They would not call him dad or daddy. They would call him father, or, in more formal households, sir. This linguistic formality reinforced the hierarchical nature of their relationship. He was not their peer. He was their commander-in-chief. The great historical debate here is about the emotional cost of this paternal model. Did this distance create a generation of men who were unable to be intimate, nurturing fathers to their own children? And did it create children who spent their lives craving an approval from their fathers that they could never quite seem to earn? Many psychological historians argue that the absent father of the Victorian era, while physically present, was emotionally unavailable, and that this had lasting consequences for both individuals and society. However, other historians argue that this is a present ISD critique, judging the past by today's standards of fatherhood. They contend that the Victorian father was not failing at his role. He was fulfilling it perfectly according to the expectations of his time. His primary duty was to provide moral and financial leadership, not to change nappies or play on the floor. In their view, a father who was firm, just, and a good provider was a good father. The emotional intimacy we value today was simply not part of the job description. They argue that children understood and accepted this, and that they derived their sense of security not from their father's hugs, but from the stability and status he provided. You see your father standing in the hallway, about to leave for his club. He is a tall, imposing figure in his dark coat and top hat. He looks at you and gives a slight, formal nod. "Be good," he says, his voice a low rumble. And then he is gone, out into the mysterious world of men. You are left with a feeling of awe, or fear, and of a deep, unbridgeable distance. You know he is the center of your world, but you can only ever observe him from a safe and respectful orbit. If your father is the distant, inaccessible god of your family, your mother is his high priestess. She is the embodiment of domestic authority, the manager of the household, and the guardian of the family's social standing. But she is not, in the way you might understand it, a caregiver. Her relationship with you is as scheduled and as role-defined as your father's. You see her at the children's hour, where she receives you like a visiting dignitary. You may see her on your formal walks in the park, where she is performing her own role as a respectable society matron. But her daily life is a whirlwind of duties that have very little to do with you. Her primary role is to be the angel in the house, a term made famous by a popular Victorian poem. This meant she was expected to be the moral center of the family, a paragon of virtue, piety, and feminine grace. But on a practical level, she is the chief executive officer of a complex domestic enterprise. A household of your class is not just a home. It is a small business with a large staff of servants to manage. Your mother's day is consumed with this management. She meets with the cook in the morning to plan the day's menus. She inspects the house to ensure the maids have cleaned to her exacting standards. She checks the household accounts, keeps track of inventories, and orders supplies. She spends hours at her desk, writing letters to maintain the family's vast network of social connections. arranging visits, and accepting or declining invitations. Her life is a constant performance of respectability. Her own clothing, the decor of the house, the quality of her dinner parties. All of it is a reflection of her husband's success and her own good taste. She is under immense pressure to maintain a perfect, serene, and well-ordered home. In this context, the noisy, messy, and unpredictable reality of small children is a problem to be managed, a potential disruption to the smooth running of the household machine. This is why you have a nanny. Nanny's job is to contain you, to keep the chaos of childhood confined to the nursery, so that your mother can get on with the serious business of running the house. This is not to say she is devoid of maternal feeling. Her love for you is expressed in her managerial role, by ensuring you have a clean home, good food, and a respectable upbringing. She is fulfilling her maternal duty. She may worry about you deeply, but she will discuss her worries with Nanny or her husband, not with you. A telling detail about a mother's relationship with her children is the lying minus and period after childbirth. For weeks, sometimes even months, after a new baby was born, the mother would be confined to her room. A period of rest and recovery. The new baby would be handed over almost immediately to a wet nurse, a woman hired to breastfeed the child, and the nanny. This meant that from the very first days of life, the primary bond was often formed not with the biological mother, but with a paid caregiver. The historical debate about the Victorian mother is a fierce one, often tied to modern feminist critiques. One view sees the angel in the house ideal as a suffocating prison. It trapped women in the domestic sphere, denied them access to education and professional life, and forced them into a passional, subordinate role. In this view, the emotional distance between a mother and her children was a tragic consequence of a patriarchal system that limited women's choices and devalued their role as caregivers, outsourcing it to servants. Another, more revisionist perspective argues that we should not underestimate the power that women wielded within their separate sphere. A mistress of a large household was not a passive, decorative object. She was a skilled manager, a logistician, an accountant, and a diplomat. She held real power within her domain. This view suggests that mothers were not rejecting their children, but were making a pragmatic choice to focus their energies on the part of their role that society valued most, household management. They argue that the close, collaborative relationship between a mother and a nanny could be a powerful female partnership, a way of successfully raising children within the constraints of their world. You see your mother gliding down the hallway, her silk dress rustling. She is on her way out to pay a social call on a neighbor. She pauses and looks at you, a slight, pleasant smile on her face. Have you been practicing your scales, dear? She asks. Mrs. Fitzwilliam will be coming for tea on Tuesday, and I should like you to play for her. She does not ask if you are happy or sad. She asks about your performance. She is not your playmate. She is your producer, your director, and the eternally watchful audience for the long, slow performance of your childhood. There is one day of the week when the already quiet and restrictive atmosphere of your life becomes almost suffocatingly so. This day is Sunday. The Victorian Sunday, or Sabbath, is not a day of rest and relaxation. It is a day of profound, soul-crushing boredom and intense religious observance. The day begins differently. There is a sense of hushed reverence in the house. The servants move more quietly. The usual sounds of a weekday, the distant clatter of the kitchen, the rumble of delivery carts in the street, are absent. The world outside seems to be holding its breath. You are dressed in your absolute best clothes, your Sunday best. These are even stiffer and more uncomfortable than your weekday attire. They are clothes designed for sitting perfectly still in a church pew for hours on end. Any thought of play is out of the question. Breakfast is a quiet, somber affair. After the meal, the entire household, including the servants, is assembled in the drawing room for family prayers. Led by your father, he reads a long passage from the Bible in a deep, monotonous voice. You kneel on the hard floor, your knees aching, trying not to fidget as the prayer drones on undone. Then comes the main event, church. You walk to church as a family, a solemn procession of piety. The church service is an ordeal of endurance. The pews are hard, the air is cold and stuffy, and the sermon is incomprehensibly long. The vicar speaks in a booming voice about sin, damnation, and the fires of hell. You sit there, trying to look attentive, your legs itching, your mind wandering, but terrified of being caught looking bored, which would be a sign of a disrespectful and impious heart. The afternoon is the true wasteland of the day. All normal activities are forbidden. Your toys are locked away. To play with a doll or a set of soldiers on the Sabbath would be a grave sin. All games are prohibited. The only books you are allowed to read are the Bible or books of sermons. Even taking a walk is discouraged, unless it is a short, solemn walk to a graveyard to contemplate your own mortality. You are expected to spend the afternoon sitting quietly, reading your religious texts, or perhaps engaging in quiet, improving conversation with your siblings, such as quizzing each other on the catechism. There is no escape. The hours stretch before you. The vast, empty desert of enforced piety. The silence in the house is absolute. Even laughter seems to be forbidden. A strange and telling detail of the Victorian Sunday was the Sabbatarian movement. This was a powerful social and political lobby that sought to enforce the strictest possible observance of the Sabbath across the entire country. They successfully campaigned to shut down museums, galleries, and even public parks on Sundays, believing that these were sources of frivolous distraction that would lure the working classes away from church. For a child, this meant that even the limited escape of a walk in the park was often denied them. Historians are divided on the true nature and impact of the Victorian Sunday. One view sees it as a form of social control, a way for the religious and social elite to impose their values on the rest of the population. They argue that it was a day of misery and hypocrisy, particularly for children and the poor, who were denied their only day of leisure. It was a tool for instilling obedience and conformity, a weekly reminder of the power of the church and the patriarchal head of the household. Another perspective, however, argues that we should not underestimate the genuine spiritual fulfillment that many people derived from the Sabbath. In a world of relentless, back-breaking work, Sunday was a day that was genuinely different, a day set apart for higher things. For a deeply religious family, it was a precious opportunity to focus on their faith and on their connection with God. They were not trying to make their children miserable. They were trying to save their souls. They believed that a day of quiet contemplation and religious study was the most valuable gift they could give them. You sit by the nursery window, watching the slow, gray drizzle of a Sunday afternoon. You have read the same chapter of Genesis 3 times, but the words blur before your eyes. You are bored, not just a little bored, but a deep, profound, existential kind of bored. You feel a scream of frustration building up inside you, a desperate desire to run, to shout, to do something, but you crush it down. You smooth your stiff dress, pick up your Bible, and find your place once again. It is Sunday, and on Sunday, you are very, very good. As dusk gathers outside the nursery window, painting the sky in shades of gray and violet, the final rituals of your long, structured day begin. The evening meal in the nursery has been consumed. Another bland and wholesome affair of boiled meat and steamed pudding. The last of the improving books has been put away. No, it is time to say goodnight to your parents. This is not a casual affair. No sleepy stumbling into your parents' arms for a bedtime story, like the children's hour in the morning. This is a formal, scheduled event. Nanny gives you a final tidying, ensuring your hair is neat and your face is clean. You are once again presentable, ready for your final audience of the day. You descend the staircase into the hushed, gaslit world of the downstairs. Your parents are likely in the drawing room, taking a quiet moment before their own late dinner. Your father might be reading the evening paper, and your mother might be engaged in some needlework. They look up as you and Nanny appear at the door. You approach them, your steps quiet on the thick Persian rug. "I have come to wish you a good night," you say. Your voice is small, formal whisper in the quiet room. Your mother might look up from her embroidery and offer you a faint, serene smile. Very good. Dear, have you been a good child today? Yes. No, ma. You reply, because it is the only acceptable answer. She might lean forward and offer you her forehead for a chaste, fleeting kiss. The touch of her skin is cool, and her perfume smells of lavender and powder. It is a gesture of immense formality, a royal blessing rather than a mother's affectionate kiss. Then you turn to your father. He lowers his newspaper and regards you with his usual serious, appraising gaze. He is not likely to offer a kiss. Instead, he might extend his hand. You take it, your small hand lost in his large one. You shake it, a single, firm, up and down motion. It is the handshake of the business associates concluding a satisfactory meeting. Good night, father. Good night, child, he says, his voice a low rumble. See that you do not trouble Nanny. And with that, he raises his newspaper again. A clear sign that the audience is over. The entire interaction has taken less than a minute. This ritual of the goodnight handshake or the formal forehead kiss is a perfect encapsulation of the emotional climate of your childhood. It is a gesture that acknowledges a connection but maintains a distinct and unbridgeable distance. It is an expression of relationship that is entirely devoid of the messy, spontaneous intimacy we associate with the parent-child bond. It is love, filtered through a thick screen of Victorian propriety. A telling detail from the memoirs of the era is how many adults remembered this specific ritual. For some, it was a source of quiet pain, a nightly reminder of the emotional gulf between them and their parents. They craved a hug, a word of genuine, personal affection, but received only this cool, formal gesture. For others, however, it was simply the way things were done. It was a predictable and orderly end to the day, a moment of formal connection that reinforced the stability of their world. They did not expect more, and so they were not disappointed. It was the proper and correct way for a child to take leave of their parents for the night. The historical debate here touches on the very nature of what a family is. The modern, nuclear family is often seen as a haven of emotional intimacy, a private world set apart from the cold, public sphere. The Victorian upper-class family, however, functioned very differently. It was not a private haven so much as a public-facing institution, a dynasty in miniature. The relationships within it were governed by roles, duties, and protocols, much like a court or a corporation. In this context, a formal handshake was not a failure of intimacy. It was the appropriate gesture for the closing of the business day. Historians argue about whether this model was a source of strength or weakness. Did it create emotionally resilient individuals, well prepared for the formal demands of public life? Or did it create emotionally repressed individuals, unable to form deep, personal connections? The answer is likely both, depending on the individual and the specific dynamics of their family. You have been dismissed. You give a final, formal curtsy or bow, and retreat from the drawing room, backing away as if from the presence of royalty. You climb the stairs back to the nursery. The brave, cool touch of your mother's forehead and the firm grip of your father's hand, the only physical contact you have had with them all day. The day is officially over. No, only the final preparations for sleep remain. Back in the safety and familiar gloom of the nursery, the final stage of your evening unfolds. The under-nursemaid has turned down your bed. The sheets crisp and cool. The fire has been banked, casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. But before you are allowed the release of sleep, there is one final, and often terrifying, part of your moral education to endure. The bedtime story. This is not a whimsical tale of talking animals or magical adventures. Nanny or the governess sits in a chair by the low firelight and, in a low, somber voice, tells you a story designed to frighten you into obedience. This is the world of the bogeyman, of cautionary tales, and of the ghosts of wicked children. One of the most popular forms of bedtime story was the cautionary tale. These were poems or short stories about children who disobeyed their parents or broke a rule, and met with a swift and shockingly grim fate. A famous example is Heinrich Hoffmann's True Double UWEL Peter, Shock-Headed Peter, a German book that was hugely popular in English translation. In it, a boy who won't stop sucking his thumbs has them cut off by the great, tall tailor. A girl who plays with matches burns to death, leaving behind only a pile of ash and her to read shoes. A boy who refuses to eat his soup wastes away and dies. These stories were illustrated with lurid, terrifying pictures, and they were presented not as fantasy, but as a realistic depiction of the consequences of bad behavior. Another common source of terror was the ghost story. The Victorians were obsessed with ghosts, spirits, and the supernatural. This fascination trickled down into the nursery. Nanny might tell you a local legend about the ghost of a restless soul who haunts the nearby woods, or the story of a wicked child who died and is now forced to wander the earth, forever moaning and rattling chains. These stories were particularly effective in a large, creaky old house, where every settling floorboard and every gust of wind in the chimney could be interpreted as the sound of a ghostly presence. The purpose of these stories was explicit, to instill a deep and abiding fear of wrongdoing. If the threat of God's damnation was too abstract, the threat of the great, tall tailor or the ghost of the naughty boy was immediate and visceral. It was a form of psychological control, a way to police a child's behavior, even when an adult was not in the room. You might be tempted to sneak a biscuit from the tin after everyone is asleep, but the fear of the bogeyman lurking in the shadows is a powerful deterrent. The concept of the bogeyman itself is a fascinating piece of folklore. He is a shapeless, ill-defined monster whose sole purpose is to punish naughty children. He has no backstory, no motivation other than a desire to enforce the rules of the nursery. He is the spectral enforcer of Nanny's law. In some households, there was even a bogey closet, a dark, unused cupboard where a child would be told the bogeyman live, and where they might be threatened with being locked in if they misbehaved. Historians and folklorists who study these tales see them as a reflection of the anxieties of the age. It was a world where real dangers, disease, poverty, industrial accidents were ever present. These terrifying stories, in a strange way, might have been a way of domesticating that fear. They took the real, uncontrollable dangers of the world and transformed them into a controllable narrative where danger was the direct result of a specific, avoidable misdeed. If you are good, you are safe. If you are bad, you will be punished. It provided a sense of order, albeit a terrifying one. In a chaotic world, the debate is whether this was a healthy way to manage fear. Did it provide children with a moral framework and a sense of security, or did it simply create a generation of anxious, fearful children, prone to nightmares and the belief that the world was a dark and menacing place, filled with monsters hiding just out of sight? The prevalence of night terrors and a general fear of the dark in Victorian medical literature suggests that for many, the psychological toll was significant. Nanny finishes her story. The little boy who told lies was carried away by goblins, never to be seen again. So, she says, her voice slow and meaningful in the flickering light, let that be a lesson to you. She closes the book. The story hangs in the air, its chilling tendrils seeming to reach into the dark corners of the room. The familiar pattern of the wallpaper seems to morph into a leering face. The wind howling outside sounds like a mournful wail. It is time for you to say your prayers and get into bed. You are terrified, but you know you must not show it. Fear, like any other emotion, is something to be controlled. After the chilling bedtime story, you move to the final act of your day, the one that seals your obedience and places you formally in the hands of a higher power for the night. It is time for your prayers. You kneel beside your bed, the floorboards cold against your knees. You place your hands together, palm to palm, in the traditional attitude of prayer that you have been taught since you could first talk. Nanny stands behind you, a silent, supervisory presence, ensuring this final duty is performed with the correct degree of reverence and solemnity. Your prayers are not a spontaneous conversation with God. They are a set piece, a formal script that you have memorized. You begin with the Lord's Prayer, the words familiar and rhythmic, a verbal comfort. even if the full meaning is still beyond your grasp. Then, you move on to a specific children's prayer, one known to almost every child of your era. The most famous of these is, "Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take." You recite the words, your small voice a whisper in the quiet room. It is a simple, full-line verse, but its content is profound and, to a modern ear, deeply unsettling. It takes the simple, childlike act of going to sleep and directly links it to the possibility of sudden, unexpected death. It is a nightly memento mori, a reminder that life is fragile and that your soul must be in a state of constant readiness to meet its maker. For you, this is not morbid. It is a simple statement of fact, a practical and necessary piece of spiritual insurance before embarking on the uncertain journey of the night. After the formal prayer, you may be prompted by Nanny to add your own personal petitions. "And what do we pray for, child?" she will ask. You know the correct answers. "God bless Mama and Papa. God bless Nanny and my dear brothers and sisters. And please, God, make me a good child." This last line is the most important. It is the thesis statement of your entire upbringing. It is an admission of your own inherent imperfection and a plea for divine assistance in the ongoing project of your moral improvement. It is a final, daily surrender of your own will to the will of God and the authorities He has placed over you. This ritual of nightly prayer served multiple functions in the Victorian household. On the surface, it was a vital part of your religious education, instilling the habit of piety and a sense of dependence on God. But it was also a powerful tool of discipline. By making you confess your desire to be a good child every night, it reinforced the moral expectations of your family. It was a moment of quiet introspection, a final self-examination at the end of the day, where you were encouraged to think about your misdeeds and resolve to be better tomorrow. A curious detail that shows the blending of the sacred and the secular in this practice is the inclusion of prayers for the monarchy and the empire. In some households, children would be taught to add a line like, "And God bless the Queen and her government." This seamlessly blended religious piety with patriotic duty, teaching the child that the social and political order was as divinely ordained as the moral one. The historical debate around this practice centers on its spiritual authenticity. Was this nightly ritual a moment of genuine, personal faith for the child, or was it simply another performance, another set of lines to be recited to please the adults? Critics argue that by turning prayer into a formalized, mandatory routine, it stripped it of its spiritual vitality. It became an act of obedience rather than an act of faith. A child might recite the words perfectly without feeling any real connection to them, simply going through the motions to avoid Nanny's disapproval. However, other historians and theologians argue that this view underestimates the power of ritual. They contend that the repetition of these prayers, night after night, could create a deep and lasting spiritual foundation. The words, even if not fully understood at first, could become a source of comfort, a familiar anchor in a confusing world. They suggest that the habit of prayer, learned in childhood, could blossom into a mature and genuine faith later in life. For many, this nightly ritual was not a hollow performance, but the first and most important step on a lifelong spiritual journey. You finish your prayer. Amen. You climb into your bed. Nanny pulls the covers up to your chin, tucking you in so tightly you can barely move. She gives a single, brisk nod of approval. The final duty of the day has been performed correctly. Your soul has been commended to God's care. She takes the lamp, and with a final, "Good night, and no more nonsense," she leaves the room, plunging you into an immediate and profound darkness. You are alone, with only the terrifying bedtime story and the somber words of your prayer for company. You lie perfectly still in the darkness, encased in the tight cocoon of your starched linen sheets. The only sound is the frantic beating of your own heart and the faint, distant moan of the wind in the chimney. The ghosts from Nanny's story seem to lurk in the deep shadows of the room. Just beyond the edge of your vision, the prayer you just recited echoes in your mind, a somber reminder of your own mortality. This is the end of your day. Your childhood is a long, slow, and demanding performance. You are an actor on a small stage, playing the part of the perfect child. The script has been written for you by your parents, your nannies, and the unyielding expectations of your social class. Your costume is stiff and restrictive. Your lines are formal and polite. Your role is to be quiet, obedient, and morally upright at all times. You spend your days striving for an impossible standard of perfection. You must be clean when your nature is to get dirty. You must be quiet when your instinct is to be loud. You must be still when your body craves motion. You must be selfless when your desires are selfish. You must be brave when you are terrified. Every natural, childish impulse is a flaw to be corrected, a sin to be suppressed. You are a small soldier in a very proper, very quiet war against your own nature. And you are a good soldier. You have learned to march in step, to obey orders without question, to keep your uniform immaculate. You have learned to please your commanding officers, Nanny, the governess, your mother, and your terrifyingly remote father. You have learned that the greatest rewards in your world, a rare smile from your father, a nod of approval from Nanny, an extra piece of seed cake at tea, are given not for creativity or for joy, but for good behavior. The legacy of this childhood is a complex and debated one. It produced a generation of leaders, of empire builders, of men and women who were renowned for their discipline, their sense of duty, and their unshakable stiff upper lip. It created people who could endure hardship without complaint and who held themselves to a high standard of public conduct. But what was the private cost? The emotional landscape of this upbringing is a shadowy territory. It was a childhood where love was demonstrated through duty rather than affection, where conformity was valued over individuality, and where the inner world of a child's feelings was often seen as an inconvenience to be managed, rather than a territory to be explored. You lie in your bed and think about the day. You think about the shock of the cold water, the itchiness of your collar, the terror of the dining room, the boredom of the afternoon. But you also think about the satisfying neatness of your copybook, the brief, warm glow of your mother's praise after your recitation, the solid, predictable rhythm of your life. This is the only world you know. Its rules are the only rules that exist. You do not question them. You simply try your best to live by them. You are a Victorian child. You are to be seen and not heard. You are a small, quiet ghost in a large, quiet house. You are learning to be a perfect, miniature adult, and in the process, you are carefully, methodically, and dutifully bearing the messy, chaotic, and vibrant reality of being a child. You close your eyes, trying not to think of the thumb-sucking boy or the Tater's giant scissors. You try to think of heaven, and of being a good child. And so, the house settles into the deep, profound silence of the night. The gas lights have been turned down, leaving only the cool, pale light of the moon to filter through the tall, imposing windows. The city outside has grown quiet. The rattle of carriages and the cries of street vendors replaced by the distant chime of a clock tower marking the slow, patient hours. Your own breathing, which was so shallow and quick with fear, now begins to deepen. The sharp edges of the day's anxieties are softening, blurring, dissolving into the gentle darkness. The starched sheets around you seem to lose their stiffness, becoming a soft, warm curtain. The weight of your own small body feels heavy and comforting against the mattress, a reassuring anchor in the quiet stillness. You can let go now. Let go of the need to be good, to be quiet, to be perfect. There is no one here to inspect you, no one to correct your posture or your grammar. The performance is over. The audience has gone home. You are safe now, drifting in that peaceful, liminal space between the world and your dreams. Feel the tension leaving your shoulders, your arms, your hands. Feel the quiet spreading through you, a soft, warm tide that washes away the last remnants of the day. The stories and the rules can't follow you here. This space is your own. It is a place of deep, unconditional rest, a place where you are not required to be anything at all. Just be and sleep. Good night.